Thank you for taking the time to listen to our weekly service. This is a listener-supported ministry, and we ask that you pray and see what God would have you give. Now let's get to our sermon for today.
Okay, so we're going to continue part 2 today of Purposes of Trials. I'm just going to read that part of that one verse again. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The reason why I just picked that verse is because a lot of times when we have trials and tribulations, we think of it being in the valley at the lowest point in our lives. We don't. I guess most of us, when we go through trials and tribulations, we think of it as a low point in our life instead of a high point. And I'm hoping that last week plus this week will teach us to look at it as a high point, an exciting time to where God is going to speak to us and use us. So I mentioned a couple. Trials test our faith. I mentioned that last week. Trials humble us. I guess none of us, well, we need to be humble. Let's put it that way. We all need it. Trials weans us from worldly things, as we spoke about last week. Sometimes we have a tendency to look that, I can pay a bill because I got the money in the account, rather than pray to God and thank Him that I got the money in the account and then use it. Always do things. How many here remembered Attorney Gibbs? I forgot his first name. Any of you remember him? He's the guy that when the government or the state in Ohio took the Christian schools to court, and he was the attorney for them, for the Christian schools. And they had to prove what would be the difference between a public school and a Christian school. What is a Christian school? And one of the neatest things about that was one of the subjects was brought up: how do you teach the Bible or God through certain subjects like math or English? It's easy to talk about history, but then they mentioned, well, if you go to history class, they left out the greatest man that ever lived, the wisest man that ever lived, Solomon. No one teaches about Solomon. I mean, that's history. Forget about the Bible. It's history. And yet it's never being taught. They leave the biblical things out of public schools. Then he talked about what my favorite thing was: English. The thing I lacked the most. And I need it big time. But how do you use English? Well, when you write a letter and you do it the proper way, in a proper structure, that brings honor and glory to Christ when you send it to somebody. When you do it the wrong way and misspell words and don't put the sentence together right, somebody reads it and says, boy, he ain't too bright. It just all kinds of things, how we live Christ through everything in our lives. So it weans us off the worldly things and looks, everything we see in our life, we got to see through Christ. Everything. Then trials makes us want to go to heaven. That's the easiest one to me, for everybody. Who doesn't wish to, let's get out of this place, I want to go to heaven, and all. But yet, there's a time for that. And this morning we're going to pick up number 5, which with trials shows us what we really love. When trials come into our life, they show us what we really love. If we really love God, we will be thankful for the trials He brings into our lives. I'm hoping by the end of the day, from last week to today, that you will look at trials in a completely different manner. That it will be a positive thing when you get it. Now, we're not looking for trouble. We don't get up in the morning, can't wait for a couple trials to come in. But yet at the same time, when one does come in, I'm excited to see how God will work in my life. And look at it in a positive sense rather than a negative sense. Did you ever think that one day you might say, I thank God for this trial? And that's what I hope you will achieve by the end of the day, if you haven't already. Let me explain. We do not look forward to trials, and when they come, we think of it, like I just said, a negative piece. But yet, opportunity. For me, my big lesson was on the motorcycle going to a rally in North Carolina. And when I was heading there, one thing I never liked was the fact that something would disrupt the trip getting there. In other words, someone broke down, ran out of gas, whatever. I'm hoping to be there by a certain time. If something disrupts that got me aggravated. I mean, I didn't get yelled at anybody. It just would get me aggravated. While Enoch's bike broke down, his exhaust stud came out of the head. Lost it, plus it wallowed out the hole because it apparently been loose for a while. What I ended up seeing with that stop, I forget what route we were. We were way out in North Carolina, heading up to the mountain areas. I think we were heading up to like 77 or whatever that route is up there. We had several opportunities to witness to people that stopped. And then finally a state cop stopped and told us it's a Harley shop just a couple exits up. What a blessing that was to have that. And then when we got there, his bike was still runnable, but you didn't want to run with an exhausting leak because it'll burn the head and everything else. So we got there. They stopped what they were doing, jumped on the bike, and what really blew our mind, because they had to helical the head and everything, because the hole was just wallowed out. And helical the head, did all that, and then the price, which I don't remember what it was, but it was way cheaper than what we even thought it would be. And I saw God work. I saw opportunities to witness, and then I realized, just because something stops doesn't mean the world came to an end. It's an opportunity for God to be glorified. And that was my first lesson. It really showed me that I got to keep my eyes off the world things and look towards God. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 3. This is an interesting thing here. Remember, we've been talking about God proving us or testing us. Look in verse 3. Thou shalt not hearken unto the words of that prophet, or the dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God will test you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Ye shall walk after the Lord your God, and fear him, and keep his commandments, obey his voice, and ye shall serve him, and cleave unto him. So here God's telling us that trials are going to come into our lives to test us. How much do you really love me? Too many people today tell me that they love their spouse. But you know what I'm finding out? Me personally, I wonder if they really do love them. Too many people are getting married and don't know what love is. My wife thinks I'm crazy because I love watching these Christmas specials. And most of the Christmas specials today is about a love story, a couple falling in love. And I really get caught up into it because most of the Christmas stories that I've seen, it shows real love, people truly falling in love with each other. And nowadays, people, they say they're in love, but they end up in a divorce. And I'm going, well, something doesn't make sense now. If they really loved each other, I don't see why someone would have a divorce. Now, we watched this, what was it called last night, The Chronicle? Chronicles. I don't know if any of you seen it. You got to watch it.
Was it the beating?
Yeah. For South Carolina. South Carolina is second.
Yeah.
Second, was it second in the nation? I don't know how many. It's about wife beating, and they interview several wives. And South Carolina is second in the nation of the worst. Chronicle. Yeah, it's 30 minutes long.
Michael Cogdell from Channel 4 News, he's the one that did it because he grew up in a family. His dad was very abusive.
They interviewed three women.
The one lady was burned.
Oh, yeah. And then one was shot 22 times
Right in the face.
by her husband. And the other one lost her daughter because she was trying to call grandmom to say dad's losing it, and he ended up going in and shooting her. Then he committed suicide because he realized what he did, But to see how battered these wives were under, these are extreme conditions and all. I'm not referring to that. What I'm referring to is I can't tell you how many people I've met that got a divorce because their husband brushed their teeth the wrong way or didn't do what they wanted them to do. Some of the things were stupid. And I do believe one thing, because let's face it, a lot of divorces take place because of money problems. And they did mention that on the thing. But listen, so what we're saying is, as long as everybody's making good money, I love him or I love her. So when someone loses a job and can't find a job, all of a sudden we stop loving them. Look in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. Love suffereth long. Love is kind. Love is envieth not. Love brags not of itself. It is not puffed up. Does not behave itself unseemingly. Seeketh not her own. That's a special one for me. Love is never about you. It's always about the other person. It's never, what do I get out of this relationship? It's about what you can give in the relationship. That's what love is truly about. I mean, all these mean something, but these are special ones to me personally. Thinking of its own is not provoked easily. Now, that takes practice. It does. I have to practice it all the time, too, because sometimes I get mad, And if I get mad, I have to... I've seen what my wife's mom went through, what she went through when she went through the change of life. So I figured when my wife was going to go through it, I prayed to God. I said, God, I ain't going to make this without you. And God's been gracious. Well, she's going through it really bad. A lot of you know that. But you know what? A simple program like Home Improvements. They did a 2-part special on going into menopause. And even though it was funny, it was true. And it made me realize what my wife was going through. Isn't it funny how a program is the thing that opened my eyes? God used that to help me understand her. So even though I had the tendency, look what's happening to me. She keeps yelling at me. It's cold one minute, it's hot the next minute, The air conditioning's up, the air conditioning's down. And I used to get aggravated. I got to get up and turn it on. I just turned it down. Well, turn it up now, I didn't get yelled at for things you didn't do. Now, I get yelled at for things I do, but you get yelled. But then God taught me, and I started looking at her side. And you know what? See, when I was looking at my side, what's the problem? Well, I'm being hurt. I don't like what's happening to me. That's not love. Love is saying, looking at her side and what she feels and all. And it taught me a very valuable lesson. My good old Home Improvements God used. Beareth all things. Beareth all things. Where do you see it's about yourself when you bear all things? Believe all things, hope all things, endure. There's another one for me I like. Endure all things. I got to endure the things for Christ. But this is about love. So because I love my wife, what do? I endure the things. One thing, I probably mentioned this to you before. What attracted me to my wife was that she was an Irish louse. She was stubborn. She would try things. I'll never forget that time you were in the car and rode off and she fell off the car, skinned up or something when we were going together and all. But she was a true Irish lass. Well, the very thing that attracted me to her turned around and bit me later on, years down the road. But you know what? What do we say all the time? Opposites attract. So what I've learned over the years, I guess we're supposed to get wiser. The opposites attract each other, but isn't that what most divorces take place? Is because they're so tired of being out. Women go into a marriage saying they're going to change a man. Man goes into a marriage hoping the women will never change. They'll stay the way they exactly were when they said, I do. And when it doesn't happen, I don't like it, let's get a divorce. To me, that's not love. They may like each other, but it's not a love. Listen to this. I got this from a Christmas. I don't know who originally quoted this, but I love it. You can live with many people. The key is to find the one you can't live without. That's the person you want to marry. The person you can't live without. Love is finding the one you can't live without. And I said, that's good. That was on one of my Christmas shows. God takes it another step further. Look in Luke 14:26. If any man come to me and hate not his father and his mother and his wife and his children and his brethren and his sisters, yea, even his own life also, he cannot be my disciples. Now, God clearly teaches that I'm to love my wife and my kids, my mom and dad. So what is God trying to teach us here? And he basically is that my love for God is so great that it would appear that I hate my mom or my wife. I don't hate them. It's just that the love for God is so high that the greatest love I have for my wife doesn't seem as much because of the love I have for God. Now, I want to tell you, that's a high standard to live by. If you love God, if your love for God is that strong, are you, if it's not, are you growing in that direction? Is your love for God getting stronger and stronger and growing each time? Because I can say this, that I know that just relating to me and my wife, I love my wife different today than I did when I met her. My love has changed to a positive thing and growing more and more and more. Are we getting closer to God? Is our love growing? God's going to test us to see how much we love Him. Didn't He do that to Abraham? Now I know that you love me, that you will do what I do because you were willing to kill your son. I don't know how far God will test us, but trials and tribulations come into our life to see how much you love God. And He's going to keep testing you. It's not going to be a one-time test. He may bring it up further and further. Is your love growing? Are you getting stronger today than you were a week ago or a month ago or a year ago? Is God in your life the one you cannot live without? Or is love just another word that you use loosely? How many people tell me they love God and they don't do? What did Christ tell His disciples? Do you love me? The disciples said, yeah. He said, then keep my commandments. If you're not keeping God's commandments, then I don't see that you're loving Him. And anything that you learn here is a commandment. Anything He teaches is a commandment. It doesn't have to say, thou shalt. Do you love Him? Is your love growing? God will continue to test us, and we wonder why we're not being blessed. I can't tell you how many Christians tell me, God doesn't seem to be answering my prayer. Well, duh. What are you doing for God? Do you love God? Are you growing? Are you getting closer to Him? Next one. Trials teaches us to value God. Now, some of these seem close, but they are different. As we look back on what God has done in our lives, we should grow in our value for God. We see from experience that God will take care of us. I see what He just did for me here as I was trying to do. I got a little blessing. What day will we meet? Friday? Friday. We ended up decided to come here rather than do our Sunday. We did our prayer time, and instead of going downtown, we went over here to Starbucks. And so we're sitting there doing our thing and all, and then I finished my cup of coffee and decided I wanted something else before we come over here because it was close to go from Starbucks here to help move some of the stuff. And I get back in line, and I'm in line, and there's two couples in front of me. I'm sitting there, not thinking nothing, and then finally the other couple leaves, and this other couple that's in front of me, and there was a man right in front of me, and then his wife. And they got in line. And I could hear them. I mean, right beside the man, he's going, I like to have this and this and whatever this gentleman wants. And I go, do I know you? He goes, yeah. He said, I've been to your banquet. He said, you are Glenn Taylor. And I went, yeah. He says, yeah, I want to buy your coffee or drink. I went, well, praise, boy, what an unexpected blessing. And he bought me a drink, and we talked for a brief moment before I went back over to Fred. But God continues to take care of us if we value what God has done for us, I believe. Everything He's taught us in the past, we can use for the future. That's what the value is. When God has taken care of me during a financial situation, and a big financial situation arises, a new trial, whether it's to be humble, whether it's to our faith, whether it's to the value, to learn more about value, or whatever we're going to talk about yet, it's a learning experience. And I can go, wait a minute, I went through that 6 months ago. And right away, what do? That's a value that I can apply now to the future. Psalm 63:3. Because thy loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise thee. Because thy loving kindness is better than life. We learn to value how God works in our lives, so we can better go through the next trial and the next trial, because, ladies and gentlemen, it's never going to stop. It's going to continue going all the time. Don't get frustrated in it. Learn to praise God when you're about to go through it, and figure out, what am I going to learn? What new experience am I going to go through? Valuable experience. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7. I think this is really interesting. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7. Who, by the way, this is talking about Christ. I'll just put Christ in here. Christ, in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplication with strong cryings and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared, though he were a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. Now, if you don't remember, in the Garden of Gethsemane, before he went to the cross, he prayed, God, I don't want to go to the cross. And I'm just putting in my words. But he always prayed, and he prayed it 3 times for 3 hours, an hour each time. But each time he kept saying, nevertheless, not my will be done, but thy will be done. But it taught me something. The humanity side of God didn't want to go to the cross, but the God side of Christ wanted to go to the cross, or knew he had to go to the cross to die for our sins. But it shows here, number one, that even Christ knew where he had to go to talk, and he went to the Father. And it says here that he was able to say, he went to him who was able to save him from death. He knew God could keep him from going through that, even though it didn't happen. But the part that I like the most is, it says, even though he was Christ, he was the Son. Look what he said. Yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. When we go through trials and tribulations, do we not suffer? Isn't it a hardship on us when we're going through? Whether we're depending on God, praying, and we're doing all the right things, we're suffering. It's a learning experience. Christ had to learn it. We're going to have to learn it. We're going to have to go through it. Learn from what God has done in the past and value it for the future. You're going through problems right now? Think about what God's done for you in the past. Use that as a great value to apply to the future. Now that you know all this, hopefully you'll go through the next trial a lot easier. Easier as will the trial be easier? No. But how you go through and your frame of mind. You can go to work and you can come home frustrated with everything that took place at work. You can also go through work, go through the same problems, and come home and be okay. It's how your attitude is and how you let it affect you. We all go through that. It's something we have to deal with each day. Next one, trials comes to us to learn that we might help others. I think maybe all of us have experienced that at some point, but look in Luke chapter 22, verse 31. And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he may shift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. And when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. Here Christ is praying for Simon, that God will help Simon. But I also want you to understand that the word converted does not mean that Simon got saved. He was already saved. The word converted here means a change of heart, or that his faith has increased. Now, to give you a good example is what we're going through right now. Last week and this week, you're learning about trials, okay? Tribulation. So now you could have a change of heart on how you're going to go through them in the future. You understand? That's what this meant right here with Simon. Next, Christ tells Simon that after God helps him, he's to go out and help others have a change of heart as well. He says, go out and you help after God has helped you. Now you go out and help your brethren. We will go through trials and tribulations, which will help us learn something that will eventually help someone. You know, when you talk to somebody who's going through some hard times, and you share with them that you know exactly how they feel. I can't tell you how many times this has happened. You sit there and go, hey, I really feel for you. And the next response is, no, you don't. You really don't know how I feel. And then I turn around and say, well, listen, I had that same problem. And the moment you say that, all of a sudden that melts away from that person. And they go, you do know what I'm going through. So it helps us when we're ministering to our fellow brethren that if we know what they went through, we felt it, we've been through it, all of a sudden you got a bud for life. Because they know, you know what you've been through. So God's going to use that for us to help other people. So that's just another aspect of trials. Trials come into our lives so we can learn to help others. Trials comes in to strengthen us for usefulness. Usefulness. The worth of a soldier does not come in times of peace. I like that. I could not find who quoted that. That's a great quote. The worth of a soldier does not come in times of peace. We will never know if a soldier will perform as well when he goes into action. You can train a soldier to shoot good. He can be a perfect bullseye. He can be a greatest martial arts expert. He can be perfectly equipped and everything else. And the moment you send him into battle, the moment some bullets start heading his way, he chickens out and runs. You don't know the worth of a soldier until they're in battle. The more action a soldier goes through, the more experience he gains, and knows how to deal with each situation. And he's put into a greater worth. Well, what about us? The worth of a Christian does not come in the time of peace, but when everything is going bad. So, the worth of a Christian determines when we have to go through trials and tribulations. That's when God is really going to know what we're truly made out of. Are we going to give in quick and whine? Take our eyes off the Lord? Or are we going to do everything that we've been learning and taught? I just put that sign up, so I haven't got it totally together. That the worth of a Christian comes when he or she goes through trials and tribulations. That's when God finds out what you're really made of. When the going gets rough, the rough get going. If I've learned anything in life is when I need something done, you know who I ask? The persons that are the busiest. If I ask people that are doing nothing, I get nothing done. And when the rough gets going, the rough guys are going to be, and the girls are going to be the ones that get the job done. Trials are here for us to grow in strength, that our faith may grow, that we will respond without thinking and look to God for directions. Now, I want you to think about something. I don't know how many of you know about martial arts, but I used to take it. I learned. I had 1 week of judo, because after that week, my mom wouldn't give me the money to pay for it. I had several years of Okinawa karate, and I got about a year of Wing Chun Kung Fu. That's the one Bruce Lee learned at before he did his own style. But one of the things that I learned while I was there was they would have you stand like this, and they would tell you to do this. And then they would tell you to repeat it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And before you know it, they had you do it 50 times. Well, then later on, they had you do it 100 times. And let me tell you, my arms felt like 1,000 pounds. It would hurt so bad. But why were they doing it? Now, do you ever watch on TV where they go through a systematic routine? And it looks like, they go forward and they do this. They're not fighting anybody, but they're just going through it. It's like a ballet type thing. And then the next thing you know, they go sideways. And what they're doing is going through a strategic motion that they have to learn, which it simulates if they were fighting 3 or 4 people. And they practice that, and practice it, and re-practice it, and re-practice it, just like I do this. Now, in Wing Chun Kung Fu, they taught me that in front of me was a square with 4 pieces in it. And I would have to hold my hands like this, and my hands in the middle of the square, both fine. So when a fist came at me from this square, I was to knock it off this side. If it came in this square, I was to knock it off this side. Well, when practice, they would tell me that this guy was going to come this way, and I would keep practicing that. It'd just be another time, again and again. Well, later on, after we practiced it a lot, they didn't tell me which hand was coming when. Then I'd have to practice, and we kept doing it. Now, why was all this done? Why was all this done 100 times, 50 times? Because if you do it long enough, the moment it actually happens in a real fight, you don't even think about it. It's such a fast reaction. And the guys that are good at fighting are the ones that have trained so long, so many years, that it's not a thought. But most of us, when we go into a fight, we'll sit there and go, I'm going to hit him in the mouth. And then you hit him in the mouth. You think it through, basically. It might be quick, but you think it. A professional fighter, it's a reaction. It's so fast, lightning fast. That's what God's talking about here with us. He gets us through the usefulness. He brings these trials into us. Do you ever think about this, how many times you had to learn the same trial over and over again? The same type of trial? Well, hopefully, if you learn it enough times, you're going to get good at it. Maybe it's prayer. Why did the preacher speak 5 times this year in prayer? Well, maybe it's because you needed it 5 times this year in prayer. The preacher may not have known, but God knew your needs. And you got to practice your praying. You got to practice your trusting in the Lord. You got to practice your love for the Lord, just like you practice with your wife and your husbands at home. When your love is so great that nothing means nothing else but your spouse and making her or him happy, that's when you know you're really in love. When your self is gone. Well, the same is the relationship with God. When you don't think about yourself anymore. And the best part about it is, the old saying is, full circle comes back around. For me personally, I don't know if it's everything, most things that I've ever given up, that were not bad, just things that I decided to put aside because serving God was more important. When I gave that up, somehow, at some point, God brought it back around and gave it back to me. But only when He was first in my life. When He was above all things. But I had to learn that through trials and tribulations. We get to the point where we respond without thinking, and we look to God for direction. We practice and practice over and over again the things that we should do, just like going to church. We're habitual people. If you get that down and realize we're habitual people, you start coming to church every Sunday, you won't think twice about coming to church every Sunday. What happens is, when you stop coming for some reason, maybe it's a legitimate, maybe you're in the hospital and you can't make it. Then when you get back home, it takes you a moment to get back in that routine again, that habitual thing. We do it with weightlifting, with exercising, whatever. The hardest part, once you're in that routine, it's easy to stay there. Bible study's the same thing. Once you come to Bible study every week, well, you're there every week. You don't think twice about it. When you get in the corner and pray every week. It becomes a natural reaction. That's what God's doing with trials and tribulations in our lives. Trials come to strengthen us to practice the things that we went through until it becomes second nature to us. It becomes useful. We learn and we strengthen ourselves for God's service. We sometimes must learn the same thing over and over again, as I just said, until God knows we have it down. Then we go to our next lesson, whatever that might be for God. With all this practice, we get good at trusting in God. And think about it. The more you have to trust in God, the more you will trust in God, and the more you see God work in your life, the stronger your faith will grow. Isn't that amazing? It all comes full circle. Everything comes around. Turn to 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7. This is a very, very important verse. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7. That the trials of your faith, being much more precious than gold, that precious perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. He says that your trials, all the trials we go through, is more precious than all the money in the world. The money is going to be gone one day. But what you learn in your trials and tribulations will be with you even when you get to heaven. The appearing of Jesus Christ when you get to go to heaven. God is telling us the trials which we will go through are more precious than gold of any type. Trials are that important. It's so important to God, it should be important to us. I trust that this has been an eye-opener for you to help you think what lies ahead for you. How you can meet each trial as an opportunity, that you'll get to the point where when you go through a trial, you'll go, I'm looking forward to what God's going to teach me. I don't know what God's going to teach me, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to try to apply all these things I'm learning. I'm going to try to do my best. Will you fail at times? Yeah. But the best part is you get to get picked up. Remember, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art with me. That's the best part. So every time you fail, God's there to help you get back up. Trials and tribulations are not bad things and can benefit us if we look at them from the right perspective. Let's pray.
We pray that we have been a blessing to you. For further assistance, call us at 864-270-1472 anytime. Send email to info@stlmm.org or visit our website at www.stlmm.org. Like any ministry, it costs money to operate. Please consider supporting this ministry as God leads you with your prayers and your financial gifts by going to www.stlmm.org and clicking on donations.